we're proud of you, and be proud of yourself for having this respect and value for human life. Human life is sacred. Exactly. Human life is sacred, something of value. Each and every individual has value in all forms and stages of human life.
It was really important for us to show the people who are pro-life what they're really doing while they're restricting access, because abortions are going to happen nonetheless. Especially with the die-in, it was to represent uterus-bearing people that have lost their lives from DIY abortions.
We have a group of people, sometimes being a small minority, that can speak the loudest. That should not dictate public policy in New Brunswick. We know this issue is divisive and emotional.
Abortion services are hard to access for rural people across the country, but those in the Maritimes needing the procedure face unique barriers. In New Brunswick, access is scarce.
New Brunswick appears to be in contravention of the Canada Health Act, giving its policy on abortion. Will your government intervene in the New Brunswick abortion situation?
The administration of healthcare systems is in the hands of the provinces.
Abortions are not performed on Prince Edward Island at all, and the government's recent idea of expanded access meant sending women out of province. Women in both provinces are doing DIY abortions at home. We're here to see why that's the case.
We're here in Fredericton, New Brunswick, my old stomping ground where I went to university. I spent a long time reporting on these issues, I guess, when I was here. In the past, we had an abortion clinic. It was called the Morgentaler Clinic, but it closed up last summer. When it closed its doors, it was even harder for women than before to get an abortion. There were 2 hospitals where women could go to access the services they needed, but they had to get 2 doctors to say that that was what they needed in writing, to say that it was medically necessary. So now there's a new clinic again. Women can pay out of pocket if they need to. And so I'm about to go into a quote-unquote pregnancy crisis center that brands itself as a center that offers all services women might need if they're pregnant. They make it look like they offer abortions, but they don't actually offer abortions. Rather, they try to cancel women out of getting abortions. So we're gonna go in there and I'm gonna tell them that I am pregnant and that I need help and ask them what it is that I should do. In case they recognize me or in case I run into them at the rally tomorrow, I'm gonna cover up this hair, which I've been quite liking lately, with this here wig situation. We obviously can't bring our whole camera crew in and come in guns blazing, so I am going to wear a buttonhole camera and I'm going to spy it up and I'm going to be like Carmen Sandiego or whoever. Oh fuck, she's a detective. I'm really happy that we're doing this though, because I think it'll really sort of illustrate what women face, or other people needing abortions face, when they go into access services here. What's funny is that the clinic is right next door to this so-called crisis center, and at the clinic women can access abortions if they need to, but it's not necessarily made clear because physicians get threatened with any matter of violence or death. You don't know which services you can access at which place, and so unless you're an activist or unless you have friends that have gone through these services, you just don't know what's available to you where. Here at the clinic you can pay for it. But if you live outside of Moncton or Bathurst, which are close to each other, or Fredericton, you're screwed, basically. There's nowhere for you to go to get these services. You know, you have to be privileged to access abortion services. You have to be able to afford to travel. You have to be able to afford to pay out of pocket for an abortion.
The average abortion in New Brunswick costs between $700 and $850, depending on how far along you are. In most provinces, people don't have to worry about this level of cost.
You know, and so women here face a really unique challenge with accessing these services that women in other parts of the country don't necessarily face. So it can be scary for them. Hi. I'm so sorry I'm late.
Oh, that's no problem. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your situation?
Basically, what's going on right now is I am a few weeks pregnant. It's for sure, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately. Okay.
Do you guys don't provide abortions here, do you?
No, we don't.
No, you don't.
We have ultrasound, but I can give you information here to take with you.
Like, what if I wanted to have an abortion? Like, where would I go? What would I do? I'm scared.
Well, you've thought about all of your options, like
What are they?
keeping your baby. Deep down, most girls, that's what they want to do. If they really listen to their heart, that's what they want.
They don't.
And then there's also adoption, which is another incredible option.
You know, I feel like I want to just terminate the pregnancy.
That's right, because
Because
you want
I have
the
to do
problem to be gone.
You know what I mean? I have to graduate.
I know that when you find out you're pregnant, all you want to do is just get rid of the problem. Like, I can't believe it's happened. I want it to not be there. And so that's the first reaction. This stage, and you have an abortion, they do have to scrape the uterine wall. It is painful. It's not something that isn't. And those little babies kick their feet when they're fighting for their life. You feel it. You feel it. But let me tell you, I didn't have any pain
When you gave birth?
when I gave birth. And
Did you get an epidural?
no.
If I need to rethink the abortion thing, can you direct me where to go or no?
Well, I think you probably know where to go. I mean, that's right online.
Did you know a fetus at like a month in is dancing in the womb? Fuck. She wouldn't tell me where to get an abortion. She said I could find it online. My pinhole camera almost showed like several times. I'm sitting there going like this, like fussing with my titties.
Is something hurting there?
Oh, my shirt's going undone. No. It's really hard. You feel like you're punished for having had sex. And that's how they want you to feel in this province, basically. Like, people get married at a young age still, and that's okay. Like, obviously there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just the standard. I feel upset. I feel upset that it's still the case here. Not that I expected it to have changed, but I talked to these people 5 years ago. The new premier struck down the restrictions to make it easier. It's still not easier.
The clinic is just down the street from my house. So I called the people at the clinic and said, I need an abortion. I couldn't actually afford it. This was right after Christmas and I have a small child, so my dad paid for it. I called him up. I just said, if you can help me in any way you can. He said, I'll give what I can, and I think it was like $800 or something. I didn't want to go through all the hurdles of waiting a long period of time. I didn't want to be sick. I didn't want my child I didn't want to expose him to that. I recognized the whole struggles that I had when I had my first child.
Right. And I mean, the other thing is, with you, the clinic was down the street for women in rural areas in New Brunswick and the rest of the Maritimes. I mean, what have you been hearing about that?
Well, from my experience going into the abortion clinic, there was a woman there who was deathly ill. Like, she kept getting up to get sick quite a few times. And I remember one of the women called me in and she said, we'll get you a hotel room tonight. You don't have to take a bus home. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she was like, oh, you're not so-and-so? There was somebody and that was a woman. She had gotten on a bus from a small town, and she might have even came from PEI, and she was going to just get back on the bus and go back after this. And after being super sick and then going through this whole process and then get back on the bus. They even tell you at the clinic, they're like, some people go to work like right after. It's like, how could you just go to work right after something like that? There should be more focus on like therapeutic aspect, like as far as support for women, because there's a thing that a lot of the anti-choicers refer to as post-abortion syndrome, which actually I think does have a lot of merit, because I was taken to the hospital and that was like 2 months after that, where I basically was like, I'm going to hang myself in my basement because I can't even handle this at this point, because I just didn't have the whole support of, I don't know, I don't even know what went wrong with that, but they use it as, okay, look what you've done to yourself, but they're not looking at the whole bodily, your body's going through, you just had, surgery down there or whatever, your hormones are fluctuating. For me, the whole medically necessary aspect of it is, there's a lot of problems that are associated with that, like, it should just be, you're pregnant, that's a medical necessity. Yeah. I don't want to be. That's it. Yeah. It's something that you don't want in your body that you need to get out.
So here in New Brunswick, about 84% of the province identifies as Christian. That's according to stats in 2011. And so basically, when you have that kind of climate, you are operating in a system that's informed a lot by conservatism. I grew up in this province. When I was a young woman, we didn't talk about this stuff. There was a huge stigma. We didn't talk about the need for having an abortion. We didn't talk about accidental pregnancy. We barely even really talked about our periods. There was just a lot of shame surrounding it. And so women don't discuss their need for reproductive health access with each other because that judgment is there. And you're scared that it will get out because these are small towns and everybody knows each other. And so that's kind of where we are here in this province.
I'd seen this display done in Ottawa at the Parliament ground, and we just wanted to visually represent the number of children aborted every year in New Brunswick.
And so how many abortions were there in New Brunswick last year?
Approximately 1,000. We're anticipating it will probably be double this by next year.
And why is it important to you to end abortion in the province?
Because I believe every person is valuable and has a right to life.
The sign, what caused this was, I was very upset that federally, the Liberal Party, you have to be pro-choice to join them now, okay, which I thought, why are they trying to polarize Canadians? Because something is legal, in my worldview, doesn't mean it's right.
How many of you have had hard things that have gone on in your lives? I mean, let's see a show of hands.
Can you share a bit with us your personal story and why it is that you're speaking today?
Sure.
Okay.
I was conceived during a violent rape when my mom was only 15 years old. So that set me up for human trafficking, and I was sold into sex trafficking on my 14th birthday. I was sold at 17 to a man as a house pet, and of course I did get pregnant. And he said if I didn't have an abortion, he would kill me. So I faked an abortion, and I got free from him. And I promised God if my baby was okay, that I would serve him, and I would bring my children up in the fear and admonition of the Lord, and that I would always tell other people that every life matters. And so that's why I'm here.
So we ask you to strengthen each and every one of us as we go. In Jesus' name, amen.
How many times have you guys done this before?
Never crashed a rally before.
That's true.
We're going to come up against a lot more than this. This is nothing compared to how we're being attacked.
Has given birth to you.
For the protest, we even made a pact, like all of us, like we can't touch them, we're going to be peaceful about this. And then like when they go against like what we're thinking, like, and they start to be not peaceful at their own protests.
Well, when we were planning, we knew the group, Right for Life, they're very aggressive, and so right away we didn't want to do something that could put us in danger. But the reason why we chose a die-in is to represent not just the women, but the people who need access to abortions, who still are accessing abortions on their own means. So the people who are being harmed and killed because of the lack of access in our province.
It's sad.
Yeah.
It's really bad. What are some modes you've heard of that people are using to terminate their pregnancies on their own?
A classic is coat hangers. People unravel coat hangers and insert them into their uterus. But more commonly, I think now, people buy pills on the internet that induce miscarriages. People have beat their stomachs. They fall downstairs. There's like a huge range of really, really terrifying and dangerous tactics that people use because people don't stop having abortions. They just start having unsafe abortions.
So we're here with Jaden Fitzherbert and Kathleen Pye. They're both former Morgentaler Clinic escorts. What does that job entail, and what was it that you had to do on the daily when you were doing that?
Basically, we stand outside and wait for patients to come in, and then we basically walk them past the protesters. We act as kind of that buffer between them and the protesters because they can be super shaming. We were called death escorts quite often. They've referred to us in their blog as guardians of the Temple of Doom, which is awesome, I think.
That's great, yeah.
The clinic today is basically saying, look, funding is no longer tenable. We can't manage any longer, so we're going to close the clinic in July.
And so, I mean, what happened after it's closed its doors? You decided to start fundraising?
Well, I think how it started is, I think at some point somebody had kind of made a joke like, oh, we'll just buy it. And it was really just started from that, but then we really sat down and thought like, well, you know, maybe we can't buy it. Maybe that's not going to happen, but is there something that we can do?
Yeah, we just we had originally thought, well, let's put like $100,000 goal, and we're not going to raise it. No one's ever going to give, you know, a bunch of feminists in Brunswick $100,000. Who in their right mind is going to do that, right? So we figured we'd get 5 or 10 maybe, and we'd use it for political activism instead. But all of a sudden, Kathleen did an interview with the Globe and Mail, and blew up. We had, I think, $50,000 within a few days. It's really great. I beam and like smile every time I talk about it.
So yesterday was the rally that we flew from Toronto to film. And then today over breakfast, we found the local paper here, the Daily Gleaner. It's run by Brunswick News. On the front page here, we've got take from contingency fund, not seniors, Tory leader says. We have a story about Chipman man fined for driving drunk in stolen truck. I mean, it's kind of bullshit, let's face it. Nowhere in the paper do we have a mention of this highly charged political rally. All of the Tory MPs standing on the steps of the legislature. Just no mention of any of that anywhere in the paper. So that gives you a little bit of a sense of how much people really want to talk about abortion and women's rights and reproductive health in this province. Best bar to party at. It's all the live music and stuff. And this is it. This is Freddie. So we're filming a documentary about abortion access in the Maritimes. I'm wondering if you guys have any thoughts on this.
I figure everybody has the right to whatever they think, I guess.
Yeah, like the right to protest or the right to go get an abortion if they want
That
to?
as well.
Yeah. That as well.
You know, like if a person wants an abortion, that's up to them. It's nobody should have the right to tell them what they can do and what they can't do, and the government shouldn't be able to tell them what they can do and can't do.
Yeah.
I do think it should be government funded too. I think the government, it's the medical procedure. It should be, and if it was, then that would take all the threat away from it.
Yeah.
I would think.
Yeah, totally. Do you think that will ever happen in this province? Like, do you think we'll ever get to a point where it's medically funded?
Hard to say. We're the only province that's dragging her butt, so to speak.
So far, anyways.
Yeah, the rest of Canada seems to be way ahead of us. So that's not the new.
All right, so we're on a road trip to PEI, and on the way there, we stopped over here in Petitcodiac, New Brunswick. Petitcodiac is a really small, sort of rural town. About half of the province's population lives in a more rural area like this. This is the sort of place where it would be really difficult to access abortion services. So the Fredericton Youth Feminists were saying essentially that people that live in more rural areas like this are driven to really radical methods of DIY abortion, and this is exactly the kind of place that women might be forced to make those types of decisions for themselves because they don't have any access. I'm not saying it happens here necessarily, but this is a good example of where it would happen.
It's obviously an incredibly divisive issue. We have to comply with the law here, and we cannot carry on putting bureaucratic and economic barriers in front of women on Prince Edward Island.
We're at the foot of the Confederation Bridge, and we're here with Dr. Robin McCory. And Robin is an OBGYN with an Amherst-based practice, and she's trying to bring abortion services to Prince Edward Island. She's going to tell us a bit more about her work, and if you could just go ahead and tell me a bit about how you've been trying to bring these services to the island.
So the way I came to be involved with this whole project is I heard, through the same way most people heard, through the media, that the reason they were giving that there were no access to abortions on PEI was that they had no willing providers. I thought, well, Amherst isn't very far from PEI, it's just a bridge away, and I'm perfectly competent and capable to go to Prince Edward Island and deliver these services. We could set up a clinic. So I called the CEO of one of the hospitals and we set up a working group, and the working group did a lot of great work, and actually we found that we'd be saving money by providing this service on island. And of course, it'd be a more meaningful service, and the women who don't have access currently because they have to travel would then have access. So we brought this to the level of the Provincial Medical Advisory Committee, and it got shut down there. Politicians of the province decided that they knew more than the doctors.
And so, why? What's the problem? Is it moralistic? What's their issue?
So the problem here, I think, is the lack of political will. And the reason I find this problematic is that we're making women's bodies political fodder. So they're using this as an issue to get elected, which is problematic. This isn't an issue about this. They don't have the right to restrict women's bodies because they want to be elected or re-elected.
Listen, we had a harsh winter, although it was short, and we had women who were scheduled to go to off-island abortions who could not access. So they were not available, Mr. McLaughlin. That's the problem. The bridge wasn't open. The roads weren't open. So what happens to that appointment?
There's a sense that the province isn't ready for it. Well, it's a little bit late for that. This isn't an issue. The times have changed. We have law that documents that this is an important service and that it's legal. It has to be provided under the Health Care Act. And they're now saying, well, there's lots of services people have to go off island for, and they're comparing it to vascular surgery. Well, let me tell you, vascular surgery is a very discrete subspecialty. Abortions can be provided by family doctors, and we have plenty of family doctors on Prince Edward Island. We have plenty of OB-GYNs on Prince Edward Island, and if they don't have those, they have willing providers to come in from out of province. We've shown it would save money. It's purely a political issue.
Right. So we're standing here right now talking about a province that doesn't have any abortion access whatsoever. Mm-hmm. In New Brunswick, there is access, but physicians are too afraid to speak with us. We approached a few, and they said, it's just not safe for me to do this. Mm-hmm. Can you weigh in a bit on what they might face and why they might not be able to speak to us?
So what they might face, the problem is there's a lot of fear about that, and I think that has a lot to do with what the Right to Lifers want us to feel as physicians. There have been Canadian doctors shot at, so we know there's risk. But I'm also married to a policeman, and they're under siege at times. He'll protect me in whatever way he can, but ultimately they're winning if we let them stop us from speaking.
We're headed over the Confederation Bridge on the way to Prince Edward Island. It's the only province in Canada where people can't access abortion services. So when we get there, we're going to talk to Dr. Colleen McCory, and she's researched some of the effects that has on people. And we're also going to speak to a woman who's had an abortion, and we're going to talk to her about some of the challenges that were presented to her.
Someone in your party, the Premier of PEI, has made slight changes to how women can access abortion services there, but women still have to leave the province if they want to actually obtain an abortion. Have you tried to get him to change his mind there?
The responsibilities around federal and provincial jurisdiction are quite distinct, and as a federal politician from Quebec, I'm very sensitive about provincial areas of jurisdiction, but I have talked with Premier McLaughlin and have found him to be very open listen to the kinds of concerns that we had to make sure that women all across the country have access to, in a timely, responsible way, to all medical services, including abortions.
You guys are being so rude, seriously.
Come on, Frankie, come on through.
Okay, you know what? You need to chill. You need to chill. That was so mean.
We're here on Prince Edward Island with Dr. Colleen McCory. Colleen has done a lot of community-based research surrounding abortion access on the island, and so she is here to tell us a bit about that. Colleen, if you could get into what your research looks like and what you set out to find.
So I was interested in creating more understanding in my community about the impacts of PEI's abortion policies on women's health. My research spanned 2 decades, and I thought that I would see a lot of differences in women's experiences across the 2 decades. And in fact, what I saw were a lot of commonalities. So the kinds of barriers and restrictions that were in place 20 years ago are still active in Prince Edward Island today. What our research did that I wasn't really prepared for is it illustrated the depths to which women will self-harm or try to self-induce an abortion when they feel desperate. And it also showed who was the most likely to feel desperate. The most common effort was to use abortion myths, such as if I fall down. Well, the thing with falling down is you have to really fall good. And alcohol, excessive alcohol use and drug use was important to be able to relax the body enough to fall. Self-poisoning. One 14-year-old girl punished her body every day for 2 weeks. She was not going to carry that pregnancy through. She knew that if her periods didn't come back, she would have to kill herself. Like, suicide was, okay, I will do everything I can. Then I get the evidence that PEI is one of the highest rates of fetal alcohol syndrome in the nation. So if I sound outraged, it's because it's an outrageous situation.
It's cruel.
It's cruel. It's the cruelest place that you would ever want to live to try to access basic health care. So the politicians are incredibly gutless, quite frankly. They have zero respect for the evidence that's been created that shows that barriers to access are harmful to women's health and exactly how they're harmful. I was very disappointed during the recent campaign when Trudeau was here in the same room as McLaughlin, and with a straight face they said, oh, the status quo is a good compromise.
The requirement of having a doctor referral and having a family physician involved, which we recognize as potential barrier. So that's really where we're coming at this. It's not status quo, it's to address the issues of access.
It's status quo. Status quo. It's simply status quo.
Well, that's a compromise that is totally grounded on harming women. They're compromising women's health. And how can that be a good compromise? Many people think it should be as accessible as any other form of care, right? I mean, it's 2015 and still it may as well be the 1700s in terms of how women get supported here. It's horrific.
So we're here in Charlottetown down by the water, and we're with Candace Hagen. Candace grew up in PEI and she became an abortion activist after being denied access on the island. So since you went through this procedure, other people have come to you needing help getting abortions, and you've helped them access services on the island that are a bit underground. Can you talk a bit about that?
Absolutely. Women would come to me needing a medical abortion. And I would refer them to Colleen. Colleen would then speak to the physician, who would then send the date back to Colleen, who would send the date back to the woman seeking the abortion. Usually it would be through social media, or I actually had one person, I was sitting down at a coffee shop, come up to me and sit down and say, so I need an abortion. I'm like, okay, let's go talk about that. Then you have this, it becomes who you know of how you can access basic health care, which is deplorable. It's so disgusting, but that was the reality. So, I mean, from what you're telling me, Candace, it seems like reproductive health care is in the hands of activists in this province and not the medical community. Is that true?
Absolutely. Right now. There was one woman in particular who sent me a message. So we sat down and I told her that there was a physician in Charlottetown whose name I couldn't tell her, but that was providing medical abortions through a series of medications and injections. So then she went for her injections and her medications, and then she came home and she sent me a message saying that she hadn't begun to bleed within the time that he had said that she would start to bleed and to start to expel. She tried to go back to see him again. She wanted to talk to him. She wanted to know what was going on. The nurse came in and said that he didn't have time to see her, and she was sent home. Anyway, she had been going through this for 2 months in total, and the pain was excruciating. And then she felt this shift and this very intensive cramp happening. She got up to go to the bathroom, but she didn't make it, and she violently expelled everything that was in her uterus all over her kitchen floor. And then having to clean that up herself after like the 2 months of pain, and I couldn't imagine. She sent me a message and told me, and I was crying because I felt like I had failed her. And then I realized that the bigger problem really wasn't me. It wasn't that I had failed, is that PEI keeps letting women down over and over again.
So we're set to roll. Good morning, everyone. This morning's announcement focuses on one aspect of reproductive care where we have heard from many islanders about the barriers that women face. The Government of Prince Edward Island has entered into a new agreement with the Moncton Hospital to provide access to abortion services for island women and have the service covered by Prince Edward Island Medicare by presenting their Prince Edward Island health card. Women will be able to directly access the service without a doctor's referral or a medical office signature.
Island women will be able to navigate access by calling a toll-free number and making an appointment at the Moncton Hospital.
Can you talk about why the decision was made to continue to not offer the service in Prince Edward Island?
Facility Moncton provides the service to all women in New Brunswick, and certainly from a transition to an access with the elimination of barriers, I think this has been a very key first step for us.